In this exciting video, you're gonna learn control flow in verse, how to make things think, do this or that or not, the building blocks of making video games and of course of programming. This lesson builds upon lesson 2 and that builds upon lesson 1 and so on and so forth. So watch those if you have not, but let's go ahead and get started with this. Open up your Unreal Editor and in our project, or any project if you're starting from scratch, even though I told you to watch the other videos, what we're gonna do here is create a new verse file. So we can go to our Verse Explorer, Verse Explorer, and here in the content folder that I have, put yours wherever you want, I'm gonna right click, create new verse file, and this one is going to be called Lesson 03, and create. And while I'm here, I'm also gonna delete this Lesson 2 object over here in the outliner. I'm gonna delete that because we don't want that code to run anymore. Now what I'm going to do is click Verse, Build Verse Code, and if I go to my content browser, I should now see Lesson 3 verse class in my Creative Devices folder, and I'm gonna drag that on so our new lesson compiles, okay? And because this takes a long time, I'm just gonna click Push Changes, and then we'll just continue going forward. So Push Changes and save. Back to our code. So previously on 24, previously on our learning path, we worked with these operations, and now I'm going to close out of that, and we're going to go to lesson 3, which we're going to talk about control flow, making things think and do stuff. We're still going to work with our RPG type of game, okay? And so we're going to say var player health of type int equals 100, and var enemy attack damage of type int equals 51. Those are some arbitrary values there in those variables. And I'm rewriting this every single time if you've been watching the other videos for repetition. It is so critical to have repetition and write the code over and over and over, otherwise you don't memorize it. I've been doing this for 15 years and teaching people for like 10 years. Trust me on this, I promise, I promise, I promise. Okay. Let's get rid of this boilerplate nonsense. We're not baby coders anymore. We're like toddler coders. Taking our first steps now. So, okay, what do we want to do? You know, we want to attack a player. We want the player to die. But what happens if the player dies? How can we check for that? Like, how do we check whose turn it is to attack and things like that? So let's have some fun, all right? So let's do an enemy attack, all right? So we're going to say set player health. I'm going to close this left-hand side here. Say set player health minus equals enemy attack damage. You've seen this before. We're going to take the current player's health and subtract the enemy damage from it and set it back into the variable. Okay, we've done that before. Now, what if the player died? Like lost all their life? Like, how do we check for that? Well, we can say if player health is less than or equal to 0, I'm gonna put a colon here at the end. And by the way, I press escape whenever these dumb pop-ups come up here. Escape, and then I'm gonna say print player died. Sad face. Like so. Okay. New stuff, new syntax, oh no! Okay. We work with conditionals by specifying the if keyword, the control flow. Where is our program going to flow? If, and then we use parentheses, and we're going to say player health is less than or equal to. Okay, so this is the less than or equals to operator. The reason why we don't typically check for just health for the amount exactly is because what happens if the enemy attacked you, you know, for like 50 more than your life actually has? Well, then this would go false. So we want to say less than or equal to. If it's equal to 0 or less than, we don't want to just say less than, because then if it actually brought you down to 0, it wouldn't fire either. Okay, so less than or equal to in parentheses. At the end of those parentheses, we put a colon. Okay, a colon here that says, hey, the next area down is a block of code. Notice how it's indented, okay? The indentation is important in verse, okay? It's yelling at us, right? It doesn't like that. Indentation is important. I'm pressing tab, all right? Player died. So if the player health is less than or equal to 0, player died. So how much is the player's health? So currently, it started off at 100, and enemy attack damage is 51. So that dropped it down to what, like 49? Okay, so let's do another attack. How about that? Set player health minus equal enemy attack damage. Maybe what we'll do is, if they get attacked again, we're going to say, we'll say print player flinched, enemy attacks again, okay? So then we're gonna do it again, and then what we can do is we can grab this code, copy it, and paste it down here. So we attack once, okay? In fact, just to make this more like a game, print enemy attacks player, okay? Enemy attacks player, the attack is made, chaw! Check the player's health, chaw! Check the player's health. Let's see what happens, okay? Let's go ahead and go back to our Unreal Editor. Verse, build verse code, push verse changes. Escape and start game. All right, tab to look at our log here. If you're not on the log, you can just click the log. All right, enemy attacks player, player flinched, enemy attacks again. Player died. Okay, so our code worked. It worked as expected. So let's review it again. You have to memorize some of this stuff. It may sound confusing, but it just takes lots of time and repetition. Memorize this syntax, okay? If then. Just think of that, if then, right? Like, that's just how it works, you know? If I tell my wife how she should fix her problems, then I'm going to get in very big trouble. Else if I listen and nod and show appreciation, even though I totally don't understand anything that's going on in her head, then I get a hug and life is great. Okay, so that's how it works. Control flow, it's just like life. Everything in life has, we make decisions. That's what we're doing. We're making decisions here, okay? So let's make this a little bit more interesting, right? Because we know, how much damage the enemy has, and we're kind of forcing the player to die. Let's actually make this like a real game. What if we made it like Dungeons and Dragons, where we roll the dice and then we get random numbers? How cool would that be? Let's do that. So what I'm going to do is up here at the top, we're going to import a new module. We're going to say using verse.org/random. We're going to use some code for generating random numbers that Verse was kind enough to make for us. And the reason why we import saying using is so we don't include a bunch of code into our project that we're not using and make our game smaller, make things run faster. We're just grabbing only the things that we need. We're being polite little citizens here in the world of programming. So let's go ahead and have some fun now. If you can see random tabs like this where my cursor is in the wrong spot, make sure you always go back to the right spot, okay? Don't start in the wrong spot, start where you're supposed to go. Because, okay, if I type in here, all right, we are still inside of our if statement, okay? The scope here belongs to our if statement. However, if I go like this, all right, guess what? We are now outside of the if statement, and this code will run no matter what. Indentation is very important in verse. All right, so go to the right spot. And I'm going to say var player dice result of type int equals get random int. And we're going to do parentheses between 1 and 20, like a 20-sided die. Now, get random int is a function. If I control click it, it's going to take me to verse.digest, and it's going to tell me what it does. Returns a random int between low and high, inclusive. Inclusive meaning it's going to include those numbers, okay? So the 1 and the 20, all right? If it was exclusive, it would mean that it's going to only get the numbers 2 through 19. So player dice result. Okay, let's do another one. Var enemy dice result, colon int equals get random int between 1 and 20. So imagine that the player rolls their dice, the enemy rolls their dice, and we're going to see who goes head to head and who attacks who and does what and all kinds of things. And because our player's dead right now, let's resurrect our player, and let's say set player health equals 100. And what do we want to do? Well, first off, let's just print the values of our dice. So first let's say print player and enemy rolled dice. Okay, that's what happened. That way, when we're playing the game, we can actually see the order of things that are happening. And now we're going to print the player dice. Type in player dice result. I'm pressing enter when it does the autocomplete. And we're going to print the enemy dice. We're going to say enemy dice result, like so. And let's print those on the screen and see what happens. So we've used this random get random int. It's a function, or rather it's a, let's go into here and look at it again. So this is a module, our random module that we included using the using keyword. So we included this module, which means it's going to make these available. And these are functions. Now, you might hear me say the word method and the word function, and those are kind of the same thing, really. But in this case, they are functions because they're publicly available. Methods belong to part of a class. You'll learn about that later, but they're the same thing. So we're calling a function, okay, that's pre-built for us. And we use the parentheses to actually call the function. And then the function is asking us for two numbers, a low number and a high number. It's asking for integers here, okay, between 1 and 20. That's all that's happened. Save, editor, verse, build verse code, push verse changes. It's up to date. Start game. Okay. So, player and enemy roll dice. Player dice 13, enemy dice 14. Excellent. It worked. It gave us a random number. Pretty cool. Now, every time I run the game, it's going to give us a new number because onBegin is called whenever we start the Fortnite game. So that number will change every single time we run the game, which is pretty awesome. Now, let's pretend that the enemy is attempting to attack the player. We're going to do a super simplified Dungeons and Dragons, but basically, you know, if an enemy goes to attack a player, you know, the player has to roll the device, and they've got, you know, the player defense and enemy attack, and if one dice is higher than the other, it determines if, you know, the attack worked or not, more or less. So that's what we're going to do, okay? We're going to code some Dungeons and Dragons. All right, I'm going to say if enemy dice result is greater than player dice result, okay? So if the enemy's dice is a bigger number than the player's number, what do we want to do? Well, we're going to make an attack, okay? Only if it's bigger. I didn't say greater than or equal to. If it's a tie, I'm still not going to make it an attack. I'm going to give the benefit to the player, okay? So that's just my logic choice. So we say set player health to minus equal enemy attack damage. So only attack the player if the enemy rolled a higher die, a higher number. Now what? What else do we want to do? We can take this further. Okay, how about we say else if? Ooh, a new one. Okay, else if enemy dice result equals player dice result. What do we want to do? So now actually we're handling, I remember now, we're handling the case where it's the same attack, right? Same number. In this case here, we're just going to take one life away from the player. That's what I meant to say earlier. Minus equal 1. So a minor penalty for getting a tie, okay? Else what? Else colon what? Print the enemy missed. Okay, so that's pretty cool. We're going to take away the player damage or player health. In fact, let's print this to see if these even work. So we're going to say print attack, enemy attack successful. Player HP is now, we'll just do all in one line to keep it fast. Player health, like so. Put our quotes in here. And then down here, what we'll do is we'll say print enemy attack we'll just say roll was a tie. Player lost 1 HP. I'm going to put that there. Otherwise, the enemy missed. Okay? Let's go ahead and compile our code. Verse, build verse code, push verse changes, and load the game. To see this in action, we'll press escape and start game, and press tab. So it looks like the enemy missed. Player dice was 19, enemy dice was 13, the enemy missed. Excellent. Press escape. Okay, excellent. So our code is doing some things, and it's working just fine. And I'm not going to print through all the states, but you can relaunch your game and test that these work. If you want to be extra creative, you know, you could create a loop. If you're really adventurous, you could create a loop for these right here and loop through, actually starting probably for all of these, put all of those inside of a loop. And then you could print it over and over and over again. We're not covering loops just yet to not confuse you, but just know if you wanted to have this test like 100 times, put it in a loop for 100 times and it'll give you different results every single time, which is pretty cool. So we just did some basic logic here, which is awesome. Now I do want to show you one more thing that we can do with our if-else statements here. So I put parentheses in here. There's another format, style to do this. And the reason why I want to show this to you is because you're going to see it in other people's code. You're going to see it in Epic Games code. All right. So we're going to say if colon, notice not parentheses this time, colon, okay? We're going to say enemy dice result is greater than player dice result. All right. Player health is greater than 50. Bear with me for a moment here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say then colon enter set player health minus equals enemy attack damage else colon print the enemy missed. Okay, what's happening here? So instead of doing parentheses, what we do is we say if colon, and the conditions that we're testing are actually inside of here. Okay, we are testing various conditions. We could put as many as we want in here. Test them all. Sometimes that's nice because if you're inside of an if statement, sometimes they get really long. You know, you say, enemy dice result is greater than player dice result, and if, player dice result is, greater, less than or equal to 10, and if enemy dice result, equals 5, and see how this is getting really, really, really long. Well, if that was our logic, instead of using all of the, using all of that crazy stuff, you can just kind of move those into here just to make it more readable. Okay, so instead of, you just put all your conditions in that one spot. All right, I'm gonna get rid of those two though. Then do something. So in our case here, if enemy dice result is greater than player dice result, and if player health is greater than 50. So in this case here, we're saying only let enemy attack player if player has more than 50 health. Maybe it's a cutscene area in your game, and you only want them to get hit up to a certain amount of damage, and then the hero is going to come in on a spaceship and save the paladin who's attacking ogres with bows and arrows. Anyway, that's our logic. Then, okay, so if then, all right, that's what's happening here. So here's our then up here. If then. In our case here, it's if and then. Now, I like this format a lot because some of my ifs get pretty long as I'm working with UEFN, and so this becomes very nice in those cases. Else print the enemy missed, okay? So that's a different way of working with if statements. You can choose whatever one you like, and there's nothing wrong with doing this at all. Do whatever works for you and keep it simple. Don't stress out about things. One more thing I want to show you just for fun, because you're going to see this a lot as well too, is I'll copy this over there, and I'm going to, again, always make sure you go to the right indentation. I'm going to paste it here. So another if statement. What you'll see sometimes is if statements on the same line. Okay, so you'll take off the colon, like so, and we'll do curly braces, almost kind of like other programming languages, all right? And you'll see this on the same line often. And I do these as well too, and these are things that you'll especially use when you start learning about failure and failure contexts. You know, we can print enemy is attacking. You'll see this as well too. Enemy is attacking. All your base are belong to us. Okay, so if enemy dice result is greater than player dice result, notice we don't have the colon here on this one, and we use curly braces instead. That is another type of if statement that you will see in code. All right? Pretty cool. Now, that is it for now. I'm going to give you some work. Here is your exercise. Create a simple turn-based attack system where the player attacks the enemy and then the enemy attacks the player using random dice damage, like above. Use if else and then to determine who is being attacked and then print that. Be sure to handle when one or the other dies. So turn this into a real game with the print statements. So enemy has life and attack damage, and each player, okay, they randomly attack each other back and forth using the dice until one of them dies. How cool would that be? And then you print that up here. And if you want to get really crazy and be adventurous, okay, let's say extra credit, use a loop so you don't have to copy and paste code. If you're not feeling adventurous, don't worry, we will get there. So that's it for now. Hope you're learning some great things here. Make some video games yourself, and there's more to come. If you didn't know, my name is Mark Wahlbeck, and you can watch the next video in this series right here. And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so you can know when the next videos are released.